Title of the program is This is America and the World, and we've spent a lot of time talking about the world. Now we're going to talk about America. Over the next few programs, we'll talk about race and racism in America. Our guest on this program is Baratunde Thurston. He's a writer, comedian, activist, and the author of How to Be Black. Baratunde formerly worked for The Daily Show and The Onion and currently hosts the podcasts How to Citizen with Baratunde and We're Having a Moment. Baratunde, I just love saying the name.
I love the way you say it. Thank you, Dennis. Good to be here.
Baratunde. Tell me a little bit about that background of the name.
Oh, well, thank you for that. As with most people, I was named by my parents, and I chose not to change it, again, as with most people. So that makes me common. Which makes me less common is the origin of the name. My parents, particularly my mother, was very active in civil rights and Black Power movements of the 60s and 70s. And it was becoming popular for Black Americans to give their children African names to try to rebuild that bridge ripped asunder by the Middle Passage and the transatlantic slave trade. So my mom was committed to that, found a book of African names, a very popular book at the time, and was searching for meaning more than a particular word. And she stumbled across this name, which meant, according to the book, one who is chosen, or father returns, or even grandfather returns. So it was her attempt to invoke the spirit of her grandfather, whom she loved very much. And the name is based on a Yoruba name from Nigeria, which is Babatunde. Baba being father, Tunde being return, roughly speaking. But the book said you could do Baratunde as kind of a different version, like John with an H or without an H. And that, according to every Nigerian I've ever met, Dennis, is not true. The book lied to my mom, but the name is real. So I'm real, I'm true, I'm here. And so I have an even more unique name than usual.
Do you think you're a chosen one?
Well, I'm going to be, I'm going to parse that sentence carefully. A chosen one? Yes. The chosen one? Absolutely not. The article matters so much. Grammar is our friend in this, Dennis. And a lot of my friends, when they learned what my name meant, would say, oh, the chosen one, huh? And I was like, no. One who is chosen. That's a subtle but important difference. There could be billions of us chosen. And I think we all are if we're breathing right now.
When you were growing up, when you were a kid, did you have the talk with your parents?
I don't remember it formally. I had a lot of talks with my mother. She was the one who raised me. And a lot of warnings, a lot of heads up, a lot of lessons from her generation passed to me. I don't remember the police talk conversation. I remember hearing about it from others. I remember overhearing it, but I don't have a specific memory of my mother sitting me down and telling me this is how to be or not to be with the police. It's something I absorbed through osmosis from other sources, I think.
One of the things that you say in your TED Talk is being stopped by the police and you doing all the right things that you were supposed to do, huh?
Yes. I mean, I've my mother and police interaction, there's two quick stories that come to mind. One involving my father, who was brutally removed from his car and beat by the police in view of my sister when she was only 6 years old, before I even existed. And I didn't know that story until well after he passed. My sister told me the story a few years ago. And it's still traumatizing to think of it, because they only did it because he mouthed off. He posed no threat. He raised no hand. He had no weapon. And then they left her in the car all alone to be found by a stranger who fortunately had her best interest at heart. My police mom interaction, I got pulled over by California Highway Patrol some years ago. I'm driving down to a friend's 30th birthday party from the north to the south in the state and just, jamming. And I see those lights in the rear view, and I called my mother and I put her on speakerphone because I just didn't want to be alone. And she's a calming influence. I also kind of wanted an audio witness. This is before you could stream things on the internet. This is probably 2003-ish, something around then. And she would pass in 2005. So just that instinct to like call your mom when the cops pull you over, I don't think that's the standard response for most people, but there was some part of me that knew that she would want to know that I'm okay.
Talking with Baratunde Thurston, activist, comedian, writer, entrepreneur, now a social commentator. You see him often on MSNBC. So take a little break. Back on the other side. This is America and the World. Underwriting for This is America and the World is made possible by the Japan-America Society of Washington, D.C., featuring the 29th National Japan Bowl, a Japanese language and culture competition, streaming live April 9th, 2021. The National Association for Children of Addiction. Faces and Voices of Recovery. The Forerunner Foundation. The Rotondaro Family Trust. The Sultanate of Oman. The Kingdom of Morocco. And the Embassy Series, Uniting People Through Musical Diplomacy. I was picking up on the other side of what we were talking about before the break, the idea of you're a young person. One of the things I read about you said you were just tired. A lot of the people I've interviewed who are African Americans use the word exhaustion, that it takes a lot of energy on a day-to-day basis to be Black in America. Can you help me understand, educate me a little bit about that?
I've worked with computers for most of my life. I was born in 1977. My mother was a computer programmer in the early 80s, before that was even a known job most people could have. And so a lot of my metaphors and understanding of the world come through working with hardware and working with software. And so I learned that a computer processor processes things. There are a number of processes running at any given time, and they consume cycles. They consume energy, for lack of a better term, to reduce it. And to be Black in the United States involves running a number of extra processes in your daily existence. So we all have processes that we're running in the background, questioning, am I good enough? Questioning, do my socks match? Did I have a reasonable breakfast? But then there are other processes that come into play that are situational. Is this person a threat? Because they're behaving in a certain way. Did I do everything I was supposed to do? Did I leave the oven on, right? Concern, safety measures. And being Black, I have felt that there is an extra layer of processing around my everyday existence that costs something. It costs energy to wonder, are you being followed through this store because this is an overzealous loss prevention operative or just because you have dark skin? Did you not get that job because of the name that was on the resume or the contents of the resume, which studies have shown match those of others with white sounding names? Did you get pulled over for this or that? Did that comment, was that directed at you? Was that a subtextual sly dig at you for some reason? And in 2020 in particular, that exhaustion came to the fore because it didn't seem to matter what we did as Black people. The pandemic asked all Americans to sacrifice, but it took more from certain Americans. And so when I would see these news stories of people calling the police on a Black person for wearing a mask, they're doing it to keep themselves and everybody else safe, yet that act is interpreted as a threat, and police actually show up. And then the opposite happens too, and police are harassing and physically brutalizing people in certain cases for not wearing masks. So there's no right way to be Black in a pandemic because there's no right way to be Black. And you're running all those processes hoping you don't cross that line, mowing your lawn, opening your own business, speaking back to someone in a certain tone that might bring harm to you in the most extreme case, or lack of opportunity in a more general case. It's tiresome. And it's tiresome to have to explain it. I think a lot of us are also like, okay, so we've been here 400 something years, longer than most. From a group perspective, we were in America before there was an America. And we've been trying to tell this story. We learned your language. We wrote it down in the font you could understand. We created whole musical styles like the blues and jazz and rock and roll and hip hop, trying to communicate this. And still, we're the ones who have to prove it constantly, constantly, constantly. And so the exhaustion is also involved in justifying our experience. That's tiresome.
What do you cherish most about being Black in America?
Thank you for that question. Literally, no one ever asks me that. So you already got points. What do I cherish the most? Cherish is a powerful word. I cherish the inheritance of a legacy of creative resilience. I visited that National Museum of African American History and Culture on the Mall a few years ago. And I didn't do my homework. I didn't realize I needed like 4 days to experience it. Mm-hmm. And my partner and I, we went together and we started in the basement, in the bowels, almost the bowels of a slave ship. And you work your way up, and we made it back to ground level. And we're like, man, that was a lot of suffering. That was a lot of trauma. And we're about to leave, and somebody said, have you gone upstairs yet? But there's more. Yeah, you got to go upstairs, because we just made it to the Obama part. And it was like mostly a sob story. And then you go upstairs and James Brown is upstairs. You know, the Supremes are upstairs. Fashion is upstairs. Art, music, beauty, all this creativity born of this experience. The experience is what it is. And we can't change that. But I cherish being connected to and a part of a community that has transformed that experience into some of the most beautiful, creative works of human existence ever. And that's something to be proud of, and something that excites me. And it helps lift the weight that we just talked about of running these extra processes. That's the exhausting part. But the enlivening part is being a part of a creative tradition and recognizing that my presence is a testament to survival and also creative response and resilience and hope in action, because somebody had to want to keep living. So that's a beautiful thing to reflect on. Thanks for the question.
You're welcome. I was thinking of different people that I've talked with, and I've asked this question, putting a positive spin on it, turning the coin over. What would you have white people to not only know, because you've explained it over and over and over again for years, but what would you have us do on an individual basis? What can I do on an individual basis to help bring us closer together?
Another good question. I see why you have this job, Dennis.
Thank you.
There's not a specific single book I would tell every white person to read. There is not a single physical act I would request. But there's a general approach I would hope to embed in all of us, and especially, since you asked, the white people among us. It's a two-part thing. I want white people to let go of the fear of what true justice and liberty for all might mean. And on the other side of that, I want white people to imagine all they have to gain. All you have to gain. I think we've all been, Carter G. Woodson wrote The Miseducation of the Negro. And it's a really powerful book. It's an even more powerful title. Even if you don't know the full substance of the book, you're like, it makes you sympathize with people who've been misled. But in the American story, we've all been miseducated. And white people have been miseducated into being very attached, feeling a strong sense of ownership of things that were not earned. A system designed to benefit you a little bit more or a lot more by virtue of skin color and often gender in the mix. And then been taught to fear what would happen if you lost that. And fear, that's a lot of the response we see. I'm afraid that if that person gets ahead, I'm going to be left behind. It's a little human nature built into that. And we have a system built to exploit it. So I want white people to let go of that. Let go of the fear. That's liberation. That's actually freedom. If you're running around in fear, and it's probably subconscious, you're captive to it. And then if you can imagine with me, with us, what are the great things that could happen if we actually did the liberty and justice for all thing that's in the beautiful documents that created this version of this land? That could be more money, more opportunity, more joy, more music, more free time. All the great things that we cling to as a society and say, we're so proud that we built this. We built most of it not as a fully functioning democracy. Most of the people couldn't participate in it legally. We did most of these wonderful, powerful missions with multiple hands tied behind our back the whole way. We could do a lot more if we actually opened up, let go of some of that fear, embrace the inclusiveness required to face our challenges, and then feel good about being a part of that. So it's a different orientation that I would ask of white America more than a specific action.
Did an interview some years ago with the incredibly renowned historian John Hope Franklin. And we got talking about white supremacy. And he said, he kept repeating the phrase white supremacy. And he said, and he was talking about historically, back in Jefferson's day and the founding of the country and so on and so forth. And he said, they had nothing to be superior about. He said, we were all in this thing together. And I was thinking the other day of, people talking about the big lie and the election. But there's a bigger big lie that goes back 400 years, huh? Or the founding of America. There's a kind of a big lie floating around there, isn't there?
There absolutely is. The idea that this is the white man's land and that everything good that's come from it is due exclusively to the labors and efforts of the white man. That's the implicit lie, that all the rewards are due and overly due to white Americans. And you see it in the more explicit language, the fear of loss of the white race, the demonization of immigrants on a repeat cycle. It's like a washing machine in America. Like everybody gets it. Every new immigrant group gets that treatment. You're threatening the thing, the status quo. But there's also been an invitation to some of those groups to join in the whiteness gang, right? Membership has its privileges. And so we'll let the Italians in and we'll let the Irish in slowly over time. I'm not going to let the darker skinned ones in though. That threatens us too much. And the sadness, the irony of it is, maybe it's irony, is that the lie actually it's pretty small. It's a subtle thing. And it leads you to shrink your worldview and to see everything as a contest, as a zero-sum game, to see almost everyone else as a competitor as opposed to a collaborator. And so to limit your own growth in the process, it makes us all smaller. And men, we live in a big lie of our own as men. I'm sitting here on this TV program talking to you because I'm good at talking. I'm wearing a pretty nice sweater, but probably also because teachers paid a little bit more attention to me over time and less to the girl sitting next to me. And that accumulated so that my wisdom or intelligence, whatever I possess, was available to be recognized and hers was not. So I've got some male privilege going on and it's, I didn't feel good. I don't feel great about that, to be honest, but I have to acknowledge it. It helps to acknowledge it, to not fear what that means for my legacy. Otherwise I can't use it for something more. And I think about the fears that white people carry around terms like white supremacy or white privilege. It's like, well, I didn't do anything to earn that. And like, that's kind of the point. And so, but what are you going to do with a system designed to benefit you more than others? You're going to mope around about how it feels awkward, or are you going to use your power for good? Superman didn't complain a lot about his flight privilege, Dennis. He used his powers of flight to help people and become an even better member of society and model that for the rest of us. So I'd also hope for that. And I think there's a way out of the lie. And as always, it's the truth.
Stepping back, broad canvas, When you look at America, what do you see today?
Ooh. I see a country struggling to be born, to be what it promised it could be. I'm inspired by a fellow American, Valerie Kaur. She's the author of a beautiful book called See No Stranger. And back in 2016, in December of 2016, when many of us were still shell-shocked by the election of Donald Trump as the president, she asks more beautifully than I will now, what if the darkness we all feel is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? What if our country isn't dying, but it's actually waiting to be born? And I choose to see the country that way. There are many other things I could see, Dennis, in answer to your question, but it helps me to be an agent in my own sight. And so I choose to see a country that's trying to be itself, that's trying to be that multiracial democracy that hasn't really been in the world, not consistently, not persistently. And I see hope in that and possibility in that. And the signs of the struggle, the labor pains, to cite Valerie a bit more, are the signs of tension that we see, the division, even the violence, because that happens in response to change. And hopefully change that portends something bigger, better, brighter for all of us. So, but it's in transition, and birth can be messy.
When the Secretary of State on the way out the door said that we are not a multicultural society, I kind of said, he didn't get the memo. I mean, we are living in a multicultural society, and even it's going to get more so, huh?
It will. And what that former Secretary of State did in so poorly representing this country abroad is try to drag us backwards and try to signal to the smaller minded among us that we want to be a monocultural society, a male, white, chauvinist society. It was a dressed up memo that could have been inked by a member of the Proud Boys. They're aligned, the former Secretary of State in that organization, in their smallness. And you say that when you're threatened by other cultures. And in some sense, when any of us is threatened by something, it's because we have a lack of security about ourselves. So former Secretary Pompeo also reveals his own insecurity and a national insecurity that he carries. I don't carry that. I feel great about a multicultural America. I think that's the best version of America. I think that makes America stronger and better able to engage with a world of multiple cultures. Like, it's literally the most obvious thing a Secretary of State could use as an asset. But this small-minded dude just couldn't imagine big enough, imagine better enough to see that as a strength, and thought he was popping off some cool little shots. Oh, we're not a multicultural society. Zing! And the joke's on him, as the future will unfold with or without him, and with or without his perspective.
One of my sisters, my sister Ann, says, just to say the words, President Biden, makes me happy. How do you feel?
I wrote in my email newsletter, I send one every week, and I said almost the exact same thing, that it's just a release of tension. I don't look over my shoulder as much. I don't brace when I turn on any screen, not just the TV screen, but the Twitter screen or the Facebook screen or the Instagram screen, worrying about what proximate dangerous event has become more so because of the egomaniacal whimsies of an uncontrolled, oversized brat that was our former president. Those are my words. And we don't have that. I don't agree with everything that President Biden has done or will do, but I am so appreciative of the seriousness with which he's taken the job, of the measured outrolling of all these policies, of even putting ASL interpreters at every press briefing. Why weren't we doing that before? Not even with Obama. Why didn't we do that before 2016 either? So he's making up for all kinds of lost time and leading by example. And it's an almost literal breath of fresh air. The air feels different. It feels more steady. I like that.
We're at the end of our time.
No, we're just getting started. What are you talking about?
I hope you'll come back.
I will definitely
another visit.
come back. Yes.
It's a joy to meet you. I enjoy your commentary, and you've made a real contribution to our program. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the questions I don't get very often, Dennis. I really appreciate that.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
For information about This Is America and the World, visit our website, ThisIsAmericatv.net, or our YouTube channel, This Is America TV, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Underwriting for This Is America and the World is made possible by the Japan-America Society of Washington, D.C., featuring the 29th National Japan Bowl, a Japanese language and culture competition, streaming live April 9th, 2021. The National Association for Children of Addiction. Faces and Voices of Recovery. The Forerunner Foundation. The Rotondaro Family Trust. The Sultanate of Oman. The Kingdom of Morocco, and the Embassy Series, Uniting People Through Musical Diplomacy.